They laughed at me when I said I'd be CEO, mocked me, dismissed me like a fool chasing fantasies. Today they line up at my office, resumes trembling in hand, waiting for a salary, a future that I decide. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about becoming everything they said I couldn't be, and watching them shrink into everything they feared they'd become. The living room was packed that evening. My parents, my older brothers, two cousins, even a couple of aunts and uncles squeezed onto couches and chairs, cups of tea in their hands, faces lit with casual amusement. I was standing near the fireplace, heart pounding, eyes scanning the room, trying to find at least one face that didn't look patronizing. "I'm going to start my own company," I said, my voice firm, "and one day I'll be the CEO." For a split second there was silence. I almost believed they were taking me seriously. Then it started, first a chuckle from my brother David, then a snort from Uncle Gary, and finally a full-on burst of laughter that rippled across the room like a cruel wave. It wasn't just a polite chuckle to save face. It was the kind of laughter reserved for jokes so absurd they didn't deserve respect. "CEO, huh?" David wheezed between fits of laughter. "Of what? A lemonade stand?" Even my mother, usually the kinder one, smiled sympathetically like I was a child who had just announced plans to become an astronaut by jumping off the roof. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I refused to let them see the hurt. I tucked it deep, deep inside, into a place where resentment could grow in silence, watered by every sarcastic comment and dismissive glance. They thought they knew me. The youngest, the quiet one, the dreamer. The one who barely scraped through college, who stumbled through a series of dead-end jobs, who once borrowed $500 from Uncle Gary just to keep the lights on. In their minds, I was the family joke, the cautionary tale parents whispered about to their children. Don't be like him. But what they didn't understand, what they never bothered to see, was that my failures weren't signs of weakness. They were training. Every job I lost, every condescending lecture I endured, every door slammed in my face, all of it was sharpening me like a blade dragged repeatedly across stone. After the laughter died down, my father spoke, not unkindly but with a brutal finality that only fathers can deliver. "Son, dreams are fine, but be realistic. Our family, we work hard, we earn steady paychecks. That's just how it is." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because there was no point arguing. They had already written my story for me, failure in bold, disappointment in italics, and they were convinced they knew how it ended. But in that moment, something inside me clicked into place. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to beg for their belief. I was going to make them need me, depend on me, work under me. And one day I'd be the one deciding how much their laughter was worth. I left early that night, slipping out quietly while the others continued chatting and sipping their tea. I walked to my beat-up car, the cold air biting at my skin, and sat behind the wheel for a long time before starting the engine. They had given me a gift without realizing it. The kind of gift you don't wrap in pretty paper, but the kind you forge in fire. The gift of righteous, unshakable fury. I wasn't going to be a CEO because I wanted to prove them wrong. I was going to be a CEO because they had proven themselves wrong, about me, about what I was capable of, about everything they thought they knew. And when the time came, I wasn't going to gloat. No, I was going to hire them, and I was going to set their salaries. There's a funny thing about starting over when no one believes in you. You learn to stop waiting for permission. The morning after that disastrous family gathering, I woke up before the sun. No alarm, no hesitation. Just an overwhelming, almost feral need to move, to build, to fight. I didn't have a trust fund, no powerful friends, no fancy MBA. What I had was a 5-year-old laptop with a cracked screen, a worn-out desk salvaged from a garage sale, and a notebook filled with angry scribbles and half-baked business ideas. And debt. Let's not forget the mountain of debt. But I also had something far more valuable. Nothing left to lose. I spent the first few weeks living like a monk. Every waking hour was devoted to learning. Real learning, not the useless theory they force-feed you in college. I devoured books about business, marketing, psychology. I binge-watched free courses online about entrepreneurship, coding, finance. I studied how real empires were built from scratch, not by the lucky few, but by the ones who clawed their way up from the dirt. While my cousins showed off their weekend trips on Instagram, I was eating microwave ramen in a cramped studio apartment that smelled vaguely of mildew. Every dollar I had went into two things: knowledge and seed money. I made a rule for myself: no excuses, no distractions, no begging. At night, lying in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I'd replay their laughter in my head. Not to feel sorry for myself, but to fuel the fire. Every chuckle, every mocking glance, every sarcastic "good luck with that" became a brick in the mental fortress I was building. I didn't know exactly what my company was going to be yet, but I knew what it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be safe, boring, or easy. It would be something they couldn't ignore, something that would make them realize too late that they had bet against the wrong horse. One evening, after nearly a month of grinding in isolation, the idea finally came. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't sexy, but it was real, and more importantly, it was needed. I realized that small businesses in my city, plumbers, electricians, landscaping companies, had terrible digital footprints, outdated websites, terrible customer service tools, no online presence. In a world that was moving faster and faster into the digital space, they were sitting ducks. I could fix that. I would build a company that offered small businesses the kind of digital tools only the big players had: websites, marketing, customer relationship management, but at prices they could actually afford. Not just a service, a lifeline. No investors, no fancy headquarters. Just me, my battered laptop, and the sheer force of will that only comes when you're tired of being laughed at. I registered the company name the next morning: Rise Point Solutions. Simple, clean, unapologetic. I created a basic website myself, put together some rough sample packages, and began cold calling local businesses. If you've never cold called 100 businesses in a day and been hung up on 99 times, let me tell you, it strips away any last scrap of ego you might be clinging to. But that one, yes, that one business owner who said, "Sure, tell me more," was all I needed. My first client was a rundown auto repair shop on the edge of town. They could barely pay me $200, but I treated them like they were worth $200,000. I built their site, cleaned up their Google presence, set up a simple system to collect customer reviews. 2 months later, their business was booming. Customers were pouring in. Word spread. Fast. Within 6 months, I had 12 clients. Then 30th, I reinvested every dime back into the company. Better tools, better marketing, better service. No new car, no vacations, no flashy clothes. Let my family buy new toys and celebrate tiny promotions. Let them keep laughing. I was too busy building a kingdom, one brick at a time. And soon they would come to me. Not for advice, not for congratulations. For a job. At first they ignored me. I'd show up at family gatherings, birthdays, barbecues, the occasional forced holiday dinner, and they'd ask polite, empty questions. "How's that little website thing going?" they'd say, in the same tone you use when asking a 5-year-old about his lemonade stand. I'd smile, give a vague answer, and move on. I didn't need their validation anymore. They were background noise to the symphony I was conducting behind the scenes. What they didn't realize was that by then, I wasn't just surviving, I was scaling. Within a year, RisePoint Solutions had moved out of my moldy studio and into a real office space downtown. I hired my first employees: a web developer, a project manager, a customer service lead. All of them young, hungry, brilliant. I paid them well, treated them like gold, because I knew what it was like to work for people who didn't believe in you. We weren't just a service company anymore. We were a growth machine. SEO, social media management, e-commerce solutions, anything that could help a small business punch above its weight, we offered it. And the money. Oh, the money. Contracts started rolling in, 5-figure deals, then 6-figure partnerships. My bank account, once a desert, had become an ocean. But still, I kept quiet around family. I didn't flash designer clothes or roll up in some sports car. I didn't brag, I just watched and waited. It was about 18 months after RisePoint took off when things started to shift. Subtle at first, like cracks in the ice. At a family dinner, my cousin Lisa, the same one who once joked I'd be lucky to manage a McDonald's, cornered me by the drinks table. "So," she said, swirling her wine, "I hear you're doing pretty well. Business going good?" I shrugged. "It's steady." Her eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before: interest. Because, she continued, trying to sound casual, my company's having some, digital challenges. Maybe we could talk sometime. The shark had smelled blood. And once one member of the herd senses something, the others follow. Within weeks, it was like someone had fired a starting pistol. Uncle Gary mentioned his friend who needed a website rebuild. David dropped hints about wanting to branch out into consulting, maybe partner up. My mother, sweet, oblivious, said I should think about hiring family first if I needed help. It was hilarious to watch them pivot, to watch their smug certainty crumble into thinly veiled desperation. And I wasn't mad. Not anymore. No, what I felt was better than anger. Control. They had spent years laughing at me, doubting me, dismissing me. Now they needed me. They needed my success to survive, to grow, to fix their own stagnating lives. And when the time came, I wasn't going to slam the door in their faces. That would be too easy. Instead, I was going to open the door wide, welcome them in, give them jobs, and then set their salaries exactly where I thought they belonged. Fair, professional, but not one single cent higher than they deserved. No favoritism, no family discounts, just cold, hard value, the way they had once measured me. And that's when I started planning, not just for my company's next phase, but for their futures too. Futures where I was the one holding the pen. It started with David. He called one evening, his voice tight with the kind of fake cheerfulness that fools no one. "Hey, little bro," he said, stretching the word bro like a rubber band. "You got a minute?" I almost laughed. David hadn't called me in years, unless you count the time he needed help moving and offered pizza as payment. "Sure," I said, leaning back in my chair. "What's up?" "Well," he began, clearly rehearsing his lines, "the company I was with, they had some budget cuts. Downsizing, you know how it is. Total shock. Anyway, I was thinking, maybe there's a spot for me at Rise Point." I smiled to myself, unseen. David, the golden boy of the family, the one who used to call me a dreamer with no direction, now sitting in his apartment, probably sweating through his dress shirt, asking for a job. "Possibly," I said coolly. "We are expanding." "You are? That's great, man. Look, I've got tons of experience managing teams, sales, operations, all that stuff. I'd be a real asset." I let him talk, listing every minor achievement he could scrape together like a man begging for scraps at a feast. When he finally finished, I paused, just long enough to make him sweat a little more. "Send me your resume," I said. "We'll set up an interview." The silence on his end was deafening. An interview. I had just demoted my older brother from family to applicant, and he knew it. But to his credit, he swallowed his pride and agreed. And he wasn't the only one. Within a month, Lisa emailed me her CV, emphasizing her social media expertise, even though her idea of a marketing strategy was posting blurry memes on Facebook. Uncle Gary left a voicemail about how he could help with accounting, conveniently forgetting that his own business had gone bankrupt 2 years ago. Even my mother, God bless her, casually mentioned that your cousin Thomas just got laid off. Maybe you could see if he fits somewhere. I could have laughed. I could have gloated. But instead, I treated every single one of them like any other applicant. Professional, detached, unforgiving. I scheduled interviews in my office, the same one with polished glass doors, leather chairs, and a panoramic view of the city skyline. The interviews were brutal. I didn't offer water. I didn't offer pleasantries. I asked hard questions. Tell me about a time you solved a real problem under pressure. What unique value would you bring to RisePoint that we can't find elsewhere? How do you handle being managed by someone younger or less experienced than you? Watching their faces, seeing the realization dawn that they weren't walking into a family favor, but into a battlefield, was delicious. Some tried to charm their way through it. Some got defensive. Some stumbled, clearly unused to being anything less than the golden child. At the end of each interview, I gave them the same polite corporate line: "We'll review your application and get back to you." And you know what? Some of them were hired, not because they were family, because they fit the roles I needed filled, nothing more, nothing less. And when it came time to set their salaries, oh, how the tables turned. I pulled no punches. David, hired as a junior sales associate at half the salary he once bragged about. Lisa, brought in as a marketing assistant, Entry-level pay, no exceptions. Uncle Gary? Politely declined. No room for dead weight. There were no special privileges, no inflated titles, no corner offices. They were employees now, employees with bosses, and the boss was me. The same dreamer they once laughed out of the living room. I didn't rub it in. I didn't have to. Every time they clocked in, every time they answered to me, every time their paychecks landed in their accounts, they felt it. They lived it. And it was only just beginning. The first few weeks were awkward, painfully so. David couldn't look me in the eye during meetings. Lisa tried to act chummy, calling me cuz around the office until I firmly corrected her in front of the team. It's Mr. A last name here. The others, newer employees who didn't know the family history, simply followed my lead. To them, David and Lisa were just junior staff trying to make a name for themselves like everybody else. No one cared that they were related to me. In fact, most people had no idea. And I kept it that way on purpose. There were no family privileges at RisePoint Solutions, no shortcuts, no inside jokes during meetings, no "he's my cousin, so give me a break" nonsense. Every employee had KPIs, key performance indicators. You hit your targets, you stayed. You missed your targets consistently, you were out. Simple. David, for all his past bravado, was struggling. He wasn't used to being held accountable. He wasn't used to being at the bottom of the ladder, filling out detailed weekly reports that I personally reviewed. One Friday afternoon, he knocked on my office door, hat metaphorically in hand. "Got a second?" he asked. I waved him in, glancing at his quarterly numbers spread across my screen. He sat across from me, fidgeting. "Look, man, I know I'm not hitting the targets yet, but maybe if I had a team under me, I could manage better." I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. "You want to manage a team?" I asked slowly. He nodded too eagerly. I tapped the screen twice. "David, you're at 63% of your personal sales target. Managers at RisePoint need to be at 130% before they even get considered. You're not ready." He opened his mouth to argue, thought better of it, and shut it again. Good. I wasn't his younger brother anymore. I was his boss. And in this world, results spoke louder than blood. Lisa wasn't much better. She spent more time gossiping in the break room than she did refining campaigns. I caught her once trying to use my name to override a supervisor's decision. I called her into my office the next morning. "RisePoint's success is built on respect for the chain of command," I told her flatly. "If you can't operate within that, this isn't the right place for you." Her cheeks burned. For a moment I saw the old Lisa, the high school queen bee who thought a smile could get her anything. Not here, not anymore. After that conversation, she straightened up, at least in public, but I knew the resentment was bubbling underneath. I didn't care. As long as the work got done, emotions could rot quietly where no one could see. It was fascinating, watching the dynamic shift. The people who once lorded over me at family events now scrambled to meet my deadlines. The same voices that once laughed at my dreams now waited nervously for my emails. The power had shifted completely. But here's the secret. Power wasn't the goal. Control wasn't the real victory. The real victory was that they had to respect me now. Even if they hated me for it. Especially because they hated me for it. And deep down, they knew I hadn't become one of them. They had become one of mine. It was at the annual RisePoint Solutions corporate retreat that the final nail was driven into the coffin of our old family hierarchy. Every employee was invited to a weekend getaway at a lakeside resort, a reward for the hard work that had fueled our skyrocketing growth over the past 2 years. We rented out the whole venue. Team-building games, strategy workshops, fancy dinners, the full corporate luxury package. At the end of the first night, we held our awards ceremony. Top performer, rising star, best team player, innovator of the year. And I was the one handing out the trophies, the spotlight, the applause. I watched as David clapped politely for the sales rep who beat him by triple his numbers. I saw Lisa force a smile when a junior marketing analyst, someone she once looked down on, won a recognition award she'd secretly been gunning for. After the ceremony, I mingled among the groups, glass of champagne in hand, laughing easily, comfortable, completely at ease. David eventually found me on the patio. "You really built something," he said, eyes roaming the bustling party. He said it lightly, like it was an offhand compliment. But his tone, hollow, resigned, told me the truth. He knew. He knew the race was over. And I had lapped them all. Thanks, I said, taking a sip. He hesitated, then asked, think you'll ever move on? Sell Rise Point? Do something bigger? I turned and looked him dead in the eye. I already did something bigger, I said calmly. I outgrew all of you. He blinked, unsure how to respond. I smiled, genuinely this time. Don't worry, I said. Your salary review is next month. Hope you've been working hard. And just like that, the conversation ended. Not with a bang, not with a fight, just with the quiet, devastating realization that the boy they once mocked now owned the scoreboard. He didn't respond. He simply nodded and drifted away, swallowed up by the crowd of people celebrating a company he once thought would never exist. That night, looking out over the lake from my penthouse suite, I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel vengeance. I felt peace. Not because they worked for me, not because I set their salaries, but because I had become everything they said I couldn't be. And they had become exactly what they feared most: ordinary. Years passed. RisePoint Solutions became more than just a company. It became a force. We expanded into new cities, then new states. Partnerships with major firms. Features in business magazines, invitations to speak at conferences where suits and power brokers leaned in to hear every word I had to say. The old family jokes about the dreamer faded into nothingness. No one dared to bring them up anymore. History quietly rewrote itself, the way it always does when reality becomes too humiliating to admit. At family gatherings now, the tone had shifted. No one mocked, no one laughed. Conversations were polite, almost deferential. It was as if they believed, or hoped, that if they were just nice enough, I might forget the years when my ambitions were the punchline to their jokes. But I hadn't forgotten. I didn't hold grudges, not anymore. I held memories, memories that reminded me how fragile belief could be, how quickly loyalty dissolved under the heat of doubt. It wasn't hate that kept me distant from them. It was wisdom. You don't hate a fire for burning you. You simply learn never to trust it again. David still worked for me, his career respectable but never spectacular. Lisa eventually quit, citing creative differences, but the truth was simpler. She couldn't bear living in a world where her little cousin was permanently, undeniably above her. Uncle Gary quietly disappeared into retirement, never to mention business matters again. And me? I built an empire. I used their laughter as bricks, their doubt as mortar, and their betrayal as steel reinforcements. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need apologies. I didn't even need recognition. The real victory wasn't seeing them work under me. It wasn't setting their salaries or approving their vacation days. The real victory was becoming untouchable. Untouchable by their opinions, their judgments, their outdated visions of who I was supposed to be. They were trapped in the lives they chose. I was free. One evening, sitting alone on the balcony of my lake house, the same lake we once drove past as kids, dreaming about owning something like it one day, I realized something. The sweetest revenge was silence, not proving them wrong loudly, not gloating, not rubbing their noses in it, just living so far above the life they tried to limit me to that their opinions didn't even register anymore. I watched the sun sink behind the hills, the water turning molten gold, and thought, let them think whatever they want. Let them remember whatever version of me comforts them. I know the truth, and the truth is, I made it. Not because they believed in me, but because I believed in myself when no one else would. And I would never again lower myself to fit inside their tiny vision of the world. They were employees now. They were relics of a past life. I was the CEO of my company, of my destiny, and of my peace.